Hey there, my name is Kyle, and I've been doing real estate for a little over 6 years now, both in residential and commercial real estate. And I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the difference of how residential properties are valued compared to commercial properties. So, a lot of people are familiar with residential properties. If you were to sell property A, you would wonder how much can we sell it for? What's the value of that property? So we use the comparable model where you take the surrounding 3 to 5 homes around that house that would be similar in age, style, square footage, bedroom, bathroom size, all that kind of stuff. You kind of pull all that data together and you come up with what would be a fair market price for this house. Well, commercial, the reason I love it and the reason so many people get excited about it is because commercial is very different. If you were to go sell the commercial property or try to value the commercial property, you don't really care what the surrounding properties have sold for. What you're looking at is how much income can that property produce and how much is it producing currently. So we're going to get into that a little bit, and I'm going to talk about a few key metrics that we look at to see if a deal is worth pursuing and see if it has upside potential that make it worth it for us. So there's a very simple formula that we use to figure out what the value would be based off the income that it's producing. So if we want to know how much something is worth, so if we want to know the value of that, we need to know what the net operating income is. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but the NOI, and we also need to know what the cap rate is. Okay? Now, some of you may be familiar with what a cap rate is. Maybe that's a new term to you, but basically the cap rate is if you were to buy a property without any underlying mortgage, so you were just to pay cash for that property, what would your return be if you were to buy that in cash over the course of that first year? So what would your return be on that? So when I'm talking about cap rate, just think of what's the annual return if you owned that building 100%. Now, the thing to keep in mind, we can't really influence the cap rate very much. The market dictates that, and every market's going to be a little bit different. So a good way to find out what the market cap rate is in your area or whatever area you're looking at is to talk to a mortgage or a real estate broker, property managers, or other investors in the area who know more about that market. So we're not going to spend much time on cap rate. What we are going to spend time on is the net operating income, because that's the metric we can influence to ultimately increase the value. So when you're looking at what type of income can this property produce, you're looking at the gross potential, or the gross income, essentially, is what we call it. So you have the gross income. So this would be, okay, we're looking at an apartment building that has 20 units that is renting out at $1,000 per unit. So the gross income would be $20,000 a month that this property is bringing in. So that's the top line here. After that, we got to know, okay, what are the expenses it takes to operate this building on a month-to-month basis? So we're going to have our property management fees, we'll have our taxes, we'll have insurance, we'll have maintenance, repairs, utilities, all that kind of stuff. So you have all your operating expenses, and after all of that, you're going to take your income minus your operating expenses, and that gives you your net operating income. And that's the number that we're targeting here. So what I love about this is that we can influence it. We can do various things with the property to increase this number. I like to think of it as levers. If you pull different levers, how is that going to impact this NOI? So the first and easiest and probably most common way that we can increase the NOI is by increasing the gross income, okay? So this would be, we take that same 20-unit apartment building, we know it's renting for $1,000 a unit, but we know that the market would allow us to rent that out for $1,100. So right there, we can increase the gross income by increasing the rents $100 per unit, simply just by bringing it up to market rents. Other things we can do is, we can look at what are all the expenses, how much are they paying their property managers, what are they putting towards maintenance and repairs, and can we lower the utility costs by putting in energy efficient toilets or sinks or whatnot. So the other lever that we can pull is to decrease any of these operating expenses. So as we do that, we can get a higher, as we decrease the expenses or increase the income, then our NOI will be a little bit higher. So I want to go back to this formula here and show you some real life examples and show you the power of investing in multifamily. Okay, so let's go ahead and do an example using this formula and understanding what the cap rate and net operating income are. So let's say we have a deal that comes to us and we see that the net operating income of that building is $100,000. Okay, I'm just going to use nice and easy numbers. So we know it's bringing in $100,000, and we know from talking to property managers and brokers, agents, all those people, we know that the cap rate in that area, and let's say it's a six cap is what we would call it. So we want to know what the value is. So we do a very simple calculation. You could probably do this in your head, but you do 100,000 divided by 0.06, and you would see that the value of this property is $1,666,000. There we go. So we're at about $1.6 million just because the net operating income, we know that's $100,000 and the cap rate's 6%. Okay, so here's the cool part. So we're looking at this and we know, okay, we know that we can go and adjust some of these levers. We know we can increase the rents, and we think we could probably manage it a little bit better and decrease the expenses. So at the end of the day, we're able to capture more of the rents and increase the net operating income. So let's say we know that we can get $130,000 of net operating income. So you take that $130,000 at the 6 cap and you do that math. So you do 130,000 divided by 0.06, and we've just increased the value. I'm running out of room here. I'll write it. It's now worth $2,166,000. So you look at that, we just by simply increasing the rents a little bit and managing the expenses a little bit better, we just created about $500,000 of value between the two. Now you can imagine that doesn't take a lot of time to do. A lot of times you can do this within the first year or two of owning the property. It just takes time and commitment to go and turn the unit around. And this isn't even taken into account. Let's say that you run into a building where you know they haven't done maintenance or repairs like they should have. There's a lot of undervalued, or a lot of repairs need to be done. So you can go in, you can put in new floors and carpet and paint, whatever it is, and you think you can even raise that maybe up to $150,000 or whatever that number is. But we talk about forcing appreciation on a property. This is what we're talking about. You might be able to just do it by bringing it up to market rents. You might even be able to rehab the unit even more to increase the rents even more and find ways to decrease the expenses. So we have control of that. So obviously we've seen this, not this example in our lives, but we've seen this, and we know that if we scale it, how much equity and how much value we can capture as we replicate this model. So we've been spending a lot of time, money, a lot of resources to targeting and finding these undervalued assets that we know we can raise the rents, we can lower the expenses, we can ultimately increase the value of that property, and we can work with investors who bring that money in, and they can share not only in the monthly cash flows, but in the equity that we're capturing as we do this model. So that's what I wanted to share with you. I'm sure you might have questions about this process. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to answer more of your questions. Thanks.